All women are different, but they are all women. This video is androcentric from a men's point of view and is presented as opinion, commentary, and debate. Expressing opinions is not violence. These are ideas to challenge, question, and argue in public, because classical liberalism relies on the First Amendment for its dialectic. If you are a feminist, then consider this. If patriarchy truly existed as claimed, feminism could not. And if all men are trash and women are equal to men, then what are we to conclude? Women will die for their children. Men will die for their wives and children. And God chose to die for all mankind. Authority rolls up with responsibility. If this framing of facts offends you, click off to a cute cat video. Proceeding further will expose you to gamma bias and criticism directed at ideas, claims, institutions, not at any individual's virtue or dignity. Our method follows the 7 liberal arts, the trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, and the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy, and the transcendentals, the good, true, and beautiful. If this framework is not for you, feel free to exit now. It's no disgrace. Women are wonderful. God bless America. Men are great. Feminismus delendus est. Fatherless Wound. How the Death of the Patriarch Breeds the Modern Pathology, written by Conrad Riker. Available now. Links in description. Fatherless Wound. A field guide for men who still notice reality. The vegan leather of solipsism. How a gynocentric witch's heart rate monitor and pink steering wheel cover prove that replacing male logos with occult feeling audits is just an infantile parasite confessing her total dependence on the men who built her car. A woman with a doctoral degree, a credential she mentions with the same reflexive urgency as a medieval peasant clutching a saint's relic, has published 2,000 words about a steering wheel cover. And somewhere in the collapsed ruins of Western thought, a logician's ghost weeps. I want you to hold that image, a PhD, a steering wheel cover, a heart rate monitor, and the seismic conclusion that the civilization that gave us Aristotle's Organon, the Magna Carta, the Sistine Chapel, and the Saturn V rocket is oppressing her because the pink vegan leather makes her wrist feel nice. This is not satire. This is the actual intellectual output of the modern academy, an institution funded overwhelmingly by the tax surplus of men who lay asphalt in August and die 14 years earlier than the women who lecture them about privilege from air-conditioned lecture halls. The steering wheel she grips was machined by men in factories where hearing loss is considered a normal Tuesday. The lithium in her electric car's battery was extracted by men in Chilean pits where the life expectancy would make a Victorian chimney sweep wince. The road she drives on was surveyed by men educated in the very mathematical traditions, Euclid, Archimedes, Newton, that her gender studies department has since classified as tools of colonial oppression. She contributes a pink sleeve and calls it revolution. The dictionary defines parasitism as an organism that feeds on a host while contributing nothing to its survival. I define it as writing a manifesto about your steering wheel cover while the men who built the car, the road, and the entire logistical architecture of your existence are killing themselves at 4 times your rate, and you cannot spare a single spike in your precious heart rate for them. Let us address the medicalization of idiocy, because this is the snake oil at the center of her carnival tent. Her heart rate spikes when a man explains something to her. She records this number 94 BPM, 103 BPM, 112 BPM, as though it constitutes evidence of anything beyond a poorly regulated nervous system and an over-reliance on oat milk lats. By her own logic, her resting heart rate of 58 BPM during coven rituals proves that witchcraft works. By the same reasoning, my resting heart rate of 62 BPM while reading her article proves that it is sedative. Neither conclusion follows. A feeling is not a fact. A sensation is not an argument. A spike in cortisol is not a syllogism. The classical tradition she so despises spent millennia developing tools, formal logic, dialectic, the separation of subjective impression from objective reality, precisely to prevent the confusion of internal weather with external truth. She has not merely abandoned these tools, she has inverted them, building an entire epistemology on the premise that her emotional state is the final court of appeal. This is not philosophy. This is a toddler demanding the world recognize her tantrum as jurisprudence. And here is the tragedy she cannot permit herself to see, because seeing it would require the one thing her entire ideology exists to prevent: honest self-reflection. The tradwife she despises, the woman rolling pie crust at 5 a.m., building a home, raising children, maintaining the basic cellular unit of every civilization that has ever survived more than 2 generations, is not her enemy. That woman is her mirror, and the mirror shows something Dr. Winona cannot forgive. A woman who chose duty over demand, who found meaning in service rather than in a covenant subscription model. That woman is her mirror, and the mirror shows something Dr. Winona cannot forgive. A woman who chose duty over demand, who found meaning in service rather than in a covenant subscription model, who experiences the quiet peace of a life ordered towards something larger than her own reflection. Her 103 BPM is not righteous fury, it is the panic of the void confronting substance. It is what happens when a woman who has based her entire identity on the premise that traditional femininity is oppression sees another woman living it happily and realizes, in some pre-linguistic chamber of her soul, that her therapist cannot bill for that she chose wrong, that she traded the steering wheel for the cover, the substance for the surface, the altar for the aesthetic. She did not reject the patriarchy, she rejected meaning itself. And now she sits in a car built by 10,000 men she has never thanked, gripping a pink circle of plastic, monitoring her own pulse as though it were a magic 8-ball, and calls her paralysis freedom. Gentlemen, this is what we are up against. This is the mind that has captured our universities, our courts, our family law systems. A woman who thinks her heart rate is an argument and her steering wheel cover is a manifesto is not a philosopher. She is a symptom, and the disease has a name, a history, and a body count we are only beginning to tally.
Bunkum article by a feminist, PhD.
The soft revolution of steering wheel covers. Why my heart rate monitor proves the patriarchy is still winning. By Dr. Winona, feminist Marxist, PhD. Last Tuesday, I bought a steering wheel cover. Last Tuesday, I bought a steering wheel cover. It was blush pink, genuine vegan leather, embossed with a subtle chevron pattern that spoke to me. No, channeled something through me, something ancient and repressed and furious. My heart rate monitor, which I wear religiously, resting 68 BPM, thank you very much, though it spikes to 112 every time a man explains something to me, which is basically always, recorded a noticeable calm descend over my nervous system. The moment I gripped that soft, yielding surface, and then it hit me, sisters. This is what they've stolen from us. And then it hit me, sisters. This is what they've stolen from us. Not steering wheel covers specifically, though honestly, yes, also that, but the entire ecology of softness that our bodies instinctively crave and that patriarchal capitalism has systematically weaponized against us. Let me explain. Actually, no, let me feel plain. My therapist, a non-binary somatic healer named River, who charges $340 hour and is worth every penny of my HSA contribution, says I carry tension in my jaw that corresponds to generational patriarchal wound storage. My heart rate monitor confirms this objectively. When I scroll past a tradwife video on Instagram, some woman in a gingham apron smiling like she's never had a dark thought in her entire colonized existence, my BPM spikes to 94. That's basically a medical emergency. That's my body knowing something my mind hasn't fully deconstructed yet. That's basically a medical emergency. That's my body knowing something my mind hasn't fully deconstructed yet. But I'm deconstructing it now. Right here, for you, for us. But I'm deconstructing it now. Right here, for you, for us. The tradwife aesthetic is a trap wrapped in gingham. Let's talk about the tradwife movement, which is not, as some centrist concern trolls would have you believe, a harmless aesthetic choice. It is a backlash movement. It is a coordinated psychic assault on every gain women have bled for. These women, these smiling, sourdough-kneading, homeschooling foot soldiers of the patriarchy, aren't choosing anything. They're being chosen by a system that needs their complicity to survive. The tradwife aesthetic is the ultimate Trojan horse, a lifestyle brand that packages submission as intentional living and calls obedience traditional values. I saw a video last week, a woman with 2.3 million followers showing her morning routine. She woke at 5 a.m., made her husband coffee, did a full face of makeup before the children rose, and then spent 45 minutes rolling out pie crust while narrating in a whisper voice about finding peace in service. My heart rate monitor hit 103. I had to do box breathing for 20 minutes and text 3 different group chats. My heart rate monitor hit 103. I had to do box breathing for 20 minutes and text 3 different group chats. The comments were the worst part. Thousands of women. Women typing things like goals and so beautiful and I wish I could do this. You can do this, Brittany. The comments were the worst part. Thousands of women typing things like goals and so beautiful and I wish I could do this. You can do this, Brittany. You're choosing not to because somewhere deep in your body, your nervous system knows that peace and service is just internalized misogyny wearing an apron. This is what the false hierarchy between justice ethics and care ethics produces. We've been told by men, obviously, and by the women who serve them, that care is natural to us, that it's our province, our soft domain. And then they use that to keep us small. Care becomes cage, nurture becomes sentence. Justice ethics, the masculine domain, gets to be universal, rational, objective. Care ethics gets to be what women do, special, particular, lesser. The hierarchy is so embedded we can't even see it anymore. Less. Less. We just feel a vague sense of unease, a vague sense my heart rate monitor captures in cold, hard numbers that no man can argue with, though he'll certainly try. Scaling business, scaling revolution. I started scaling my coaching business last year, radical embodiment praxis, from a one-woman operation to what I now call a gynocentric collective. The process taught me everything about how patriarchy infiltrates even our most sacred spaces. When I first hired 2 assistant coaches, brilliant women, both recovering from what I can only describe as corporate patriarchal Stockholm syndrome, my male accountant asked me if I had a real business plan. My heart rate monitor hit 99 BPM. I fired him. I didn't need his numbers. I had something better, embodied knowing. Here's what scaling taught me. The entire concept of scaling is masculinist. Growth, expansion more, the patriarchal death drive wrapped in startup mythology. We don't need to scale like men. We need to scale like mycelial networks. Horizontally, rhizomatically, through underground channels of care and mutual aid and emotional labor that men will never understand because they've never done it. My business now operates on what I call queered growth principles. We don't do quarterly projections. We do monthly feeling audits. Revenue is important. Obviously, I'm not naive. I have a PhD, but revenue without alignment is just patriarchal capitalism wearing a feminist Halloween costume, and I refuse. The women in my collective don't have bosses. We have energetic facilitators. We don't have KPIs. We have kosher point inquiries, a term I developed that measures not output, but alignment with collective gynocentric purpose. It's not for everyone. It's not for men. It's for us. Reclaiming pleasure without shame. Yes, I mean that kind of pleasure. Reclaiming pleasure without shame. Yes, I mean that kind of pleasure. This is the part where men get uncomfortable. So good. Stay uncomfortable, gentlemen. Your discomfort is the point. It's actually the goal. This is the part where men get uncomfortable. So good. Stay uncomfortable, gentlemen. Your discomfort is the point. It's actually the goal. I reclaimed my pleasure last March. Not sexually, well, also sexually, but primarily existentially. I decided no, I realized, because the truth was always there waiting, that my pleasure is not negotiable. I reclaimed my pleasure last March, not sexually, well, also sexually, but primarily existentially. I decided no, I realized, because the truth was always there waiting, that my pleasure is not negotiable. It is not a reward for good behavior. It is not something a man gives me or withholds from me. It is my birthright, my holy fire, my sacrament. It is not a reward for good behavior. It is not something a man gives me or withholds from me. It is my birthright, my holy fire, my sacrament. The word sacrament is deliberate. I've been exploring what I call spiritual feminine sovereignty, a practice that draws from pre-patriarchal goddess traditions, somatic experiencing. The word sacrament is deliberate. I've been exploring what I call spiritual feminine sovereignty, a practice that draws from pre-patriarchal goddess traditions, somatic experiencing, and what I can only describe as intuitive occult wisdom that rises through my body during sinuate rituals I perform with my coven. We're not witches, well, we are, but not in the way men fear. We're something older. Something the patriarchal death cult that calls itself Western civilization tried to burn out of us. They burned women at the stake for knowing what I know. That our bodies are altars, that our pleasure is power, that our refusal to serve is sacred. My heart rate monitor, which I check during rituals because data is not the enemy of spirit. Data in service of spirit is revolutionary. Consistently drops to 58 BPM during sinuous ceremonies. That's below resting. That's parasympathetic activation. That's my nervous system in a state of patriarchal free bliss. That's parasympathetic activation. That's my nervous system in a state of patriarchal free bliss. I want that for every woman. I want that for you. My steering wheel cover is a manifesto. My steering wheel cover is a manifesto. I'm back in my car now, gripping my blush pink steering wheel cover. My heart rate monitor reads 62 BPM, calm, grounded, sovereign. And I realize this, every soft thing I've been told is frivolous. My steering wheel cover, my feelings, my hormonal fluctuations that men dismiss as that time of the month. It's always that time of the month, gentlemen. My uterus doesn't have an off switch, and neither does my rage, is actually revolutionary praxis. The patriarchy doesn't fear our anger. It can handle anger. It has systems for anger. What it cannot survive is our pleasure, our softness that we refuse to weaponize for men. Patriarchy doesn't fear our anger. It can handle anger. It has systems for anger. What it cannot survive is our pleasure, our softness that we refuse to weaponize for men. Our care that we redirect toward ourselves and each other. Our steering wheel covers that we buy because they feel good and not because they serve any purpose. A man would recognize, my steering wheel cover doesn't make driving safer. It doesn't optimize anything. It just feels nice. My steering wheel cover doesn't make driving safer. It doesn't optimize anything. It just feels nice. And in a world built by men for men to serve men, feeling nice for no instrumental reason is the most radical act I can imagine. This is not an opinion. My heart rate monitor proves it. This is not an opinion. My heart rate monitor proves it. Dr. Winona, feminist Marxist PhD, is professor of gender studies at a university that shall remain nameless for security reasons, a high coven member, and founder of Radical Embodiment Praxis. Her resting heart rate is nobody's business. She can be found on Instagram, Dr. Winona Revolution, where she posts daily somatic truth bombs and occasional photos of her cat, Bellhooks 3. Her resting heart rate is nobody's business. She can be found on Instagram, Dr. Winona Revolution, where she posts daily somatic truth bombs and occasional photos of her cat, Bellhooks 3. Support independent feminist journalism. Give us your money. It's never enough, but it's a start. It's never enough, but it's a start. Comments are open to women and non-binary readers only. Male commenters will be assumed to be proving our point. The biometrics of solipsism, when pathos replaces logos. A cardiologist will tell you that a sustained resting heart rate of 40 beats per minute marks elite athletic conditioning, while a spike to 150 indicates a pathological arrhythmia. But a doctor of gender studies will look at the Apple Watch on her wrist and conclude that the combined engineering miracle of the internal combustion engine, petroleum extraction, and global logistics chains, the very vehicle transporting her safely to her next therapy session, is a portable mechanized device of patriarchal torture. In the essay under examination, we are asked to solemnly accept the premise that a woman's elevated heart rate upon hearing a man explain a concept is a biological indictment of civilization itself, rather than a symptom of an inability to regulate her own emotional volatility. This is the ultimate epistemological collapse, the substitution of biometric telemetry for rational deduction, where I feel threatened becomes the undisputed legal and moral equivalent of I am oppressed. It is an attempt to medicalize a lack of self-control, transforming the friction of encountering a dissenting opinion into a clinical emergency that supposedly invalidates the logos of the opposing speaker. Consider the audacity of pathologizing competence as a cardiac threat. When a man explains a concept, whether it is the mechanics of a differential gear or the logical fallacies in her pseudo-academic thesis, he is engaging in the classical art of dialectic, the pursuit of truth through reasoned discourse. To frame this as an assault is to declare war on reality itself. It is a manipulative strategic operation designed to silence debate by claiming that the debate itself causes physical harm, effectively holding the entire marketplace of ideas hostage to the fragile sensibilities of the most unstable participant. If your nervous system interprets the mere existence of a hierarchically structured argument as a fight-or-flight trigger, you are not the canary in the coal mine of systemic oppression. You are simply psychologically unsuited for the rigors of adult conversation, let alone the governance of a complex society. The writer's approach to business, scaling not through profit and loss statements, but via feeling audits and kosher point inquiries, is the exact mechanism by which empires collapse into dust. A business exists to produce a good or a service that the voluntary market deems valuable enough to purchase. It does not exist to validate the emotional incontinence of its employees. Replacing key performance indicators with subjective mood tracking is not an innovation in management. It is a mathematical guarantee of parasitism. She fires the male accountant for demanding a real business plan, because numbers are immune to manipulation by hysterical victimhood. He brings the cold, hard currency of reality, ledger, proof, debit, credit, and she banishes him in favor of embodied knowing, which is simply the academic branding of delusion. This is the exact process by which women infiltrate, feminize, and ultimately destroy institutions, by pathologizing masculine competence as aggression and replacing it with a formless, standardless chaos where the only metric of success is how safe the mediocre feel. This ecology of softness she pines for is not a political philosophy. It is a toddler's fantasy of a world padded with nursery foam, devoid of the friction that builds strength, character, and resilience. She demands a reality where the sharp edges of logic are sanded down into harmless, suffocating blobs of inclusivity, completely oblivious to the fact that the very device she uses to monitor her manufactured outrage was forged in the fires of intense, unforgiving masculine competition. She wants the fruits of the brutal, unyielding forge of civilization, without the heat, the sweat, or the discipline required to keep the furnace lit. It is an infantile regression, a refusal to accept that the world is a place of hard edges and consequences, and that true maturity, true adulthood, lies in mastering those edges. Not whining that they exist while demanding men wrap them in blush pink vegan leather so she doesn't hurt her delicate feelings. Not whining that they exist while demanding men wrap them in blush pink vegan leather so she doesn't hurt her delicate feelings. And what of that steering wheel cover? It is the perfect, pathetic monument to her ideology, a useless, vanity-driven accessory slapped onto a machine of immense complexity that she could never build, maintain, or understand. That car represents the totality of male sacrifice. The miners who clawed the iron from the earth, the engineers who calculated the stress tolerances, the construction workers who paved the roads, the mechanics who keep the engine running. She contributes a piece of pink plastic manufactured by exploited labor in a factory she pretends doesn't exist, slaps it on the wheel, and declares herself a revolutionary. This is the sum total of her contribution to the world. A thin, decorative layer of distraction placed over the immense, load-bearing infrastructure of male achievement, all while biting the hand that feeds, shelters, and transports her. Her visceral, heart-spiking hatred of the tradwife is the most revealing confession of all. It is not solidarity that drives her rage, but the searing, jealous resentment of the dysfunctional toward the functional. Her visceral, heart-spiking hatred of the tradwife is the most revealing confession of all. It is not solidarity that drives her rage, but the searing, jealous resentment of the dysfunctional toward the functional. The tradwife operates in the realm of tangible reality, creating life, nurturing tissue, building a home which requires immense sacrifice, discipline, and selflessness. The feminist, by contrast, operates in the realm of pure, solipsistic consumption, cobbling together ideology and coven rituals that produce nothing and sustain no one. The tradwife's peaceful smile is not internalized misogyny, it is the serenity of a woman who has fulfilled her biological and spiritual purpose, contrasting sharply with the frantic, medicated hysteria of a woman who has fled from her nature into the barren wasteland of careerism and ideological paranoia. The feminist does not hate the tradwife because the tradwife is oppressed. She hates her because the tradwife is a living indictment of her own life choices, a mirror reflecting back the horrifying void of her own existential barrenness. Ultimately, this entire worldview is a solipsistic singularity, a black hole of self-absorption, where the only truth is my truth, validated not by the external world or the divine spark of reason, but by the fluctuating readout on a biometric monitor. It is a theology of the tantrum where reality is not a fixed objective order to be discovered and obeyed, but a malleable dream to be shaped by her moods. When a woman's knowing is deemed superior to empirical data, and when her emotional comfort is elevated above the constitutional rights of due process and free speech, you are not witnessing a soft revolution. You are witnessing the death rattle of a civilization that has lost the courage to tell its most spoiled children no, and the wisdom to recognize that surrendering the wheel to those who value feelings over facts leads only to the abyss. I once watched a woman in a board meeting declare that a male colleague's tone had given her physical symptoms of oppression, at which point she demanded the meeting be suspended until she felt psychologically safe enough to continue. The room complied. The clock ticked, the agenda died, nothing was decided. 2 weeks later, that same organization fired a man for missing a deadline because he had stayed up all night working on the very project that meeting was supposed to advance. This is the world we have built, gentlemen. A world where a woman's discomfort is an emergency requiring institutional intervention, and a man's destruction is just the cost of doing business. Dr. Winona, feminist Marxist, who I assume holds her PhD in a discipline that has never once cured a disease, built a bridge, or fed a hungry mouth, has provided us with the perfect specimen of modern pathology. The medicalization of resentment. She wears a heart rate monitor the way a medieval peasant wore a saint's relic, as a talisman against having to form a coherent argument. Her heart rate spikes when a man explains something to her. Mine spikes when I contemplate the billions of dollars extracted from men through family courts to fund a system that treats fathers as wallets and visitors in their own children's lives. But here is the critical difference. I do not confuse my physiological arousal with epistemological authority. My elevated pulse proves nothing except that I am alive and capable of righteous indignation. Her elevated pulse proves nothing except that she has mistaken her endocrine system for a philosophical treatise. The Greeks had a word for those who could not distinguish between feeling and knowing. They called them children, and they expected them to grow up. The finest trick the feminine imperative ever pulled was convincing the world that women's feelings constitute data. Let us conduct a simple thought experiment. A man's heart rate spikes to 112 when his wife tells him she is leaving him and taking the children, the house, and half his future earnings, through a family court system that presumes his guilt and her innocence. Is his elevated heart rate treated as objective evidence of systemic injustice? Is it cited in peer-reviewed literature? Does it generate sympathy pieces in national newspapers? Of course not. His suffering is invisible by design. The empathy gap is not a theory. It is a measurable, quantifiable phenomenon demonstrated in study after study. When researchers show subjects images of suffering, neural responses vary dramatically based on the sex of the sufferer. Female pain lights up empathy centers like a Christmas tree. Male pain registers as background noise. This is not patriarchy. This is biology, and the civilization that once channeled that biological reality into functional institutions, marriage that bound men to children, property rights that rewarded male productivity. Social structures that honored sacrifice has been systematically dismantled by exactly the kind of thinking Dr. Winona represents, the thinking that says, I feel it, therefore it is real, therefore you must obey. Social structures that honored sacrifice has been systematically dismantled by exactly the kind of thinking Dr. Winona represents, the thinking that says, I feel it, therefore it is real, therefore you must obey. Consider her queered growth principles with the cold eye of a man who has actually built something in this world. She replaced key performance indicators with feeling audits. She replaced revenue projections with kosher point inquiries. She fired an accountant for requesting a business plan. I want you to pause and truly absorb the magnificent insanity of this act. An accountant is a human spreadsheet, a creature of numbers and reality, and his job is to tell you whether your enterprise can survive contact with arithmetic. She fired him because arithmetic was insufficiently aligned with her embodied knowing. This is the exact mechanism by which women destroy every institution they capture. They do not conquer through competence. They conquer through complaint. They enter a space built by men, academia, corporate HR, government bureaucracy, the helping professions, and they redefine the purpose of that space from producing results to validating feelings. Once the redefinition is complete, the institution becomes a parasite. It consumes resources. It produces nothing. It exists solely to employ and emotionally sustain the women who captured it. Her coaching collective is a microcosm of the welfare state itself, a mechanism for transferring resources from people who produce value to people who produce grievances, wrapped in language that makes parasitism sound like liberation.
Liberation, language that makes parasitism sound like liberation.
Now observe her steering wheel cover, that blush pink monument to monumental insignificance. She grips it and feels sovereign. She feels revolutionary. She feels like she has struck a blow against patriarchal capitalism. Meanwhile, the automobile she sits in represents perhaps the greatest concentration of masculine genius in human history. The internal combustion engine, men. The metallurgy that makes the engine block possible, men. The petroleum extraction and refinement, men bleeding and dying on oil rigs and in refineries at rates that would make OSHA weep. The road infrastructure spanning continents, men with dynamite and graders and calloused hands. The global supply chain that manufactured her little pink talisman and shipped it to her door in 2 days. Men driving trucks, men loading ships, men operating cranes in every port on Earth. She contributes a piece of colored plastic to a machine of incomprehensible complexity built by millions of men over centuries, and she calls herself revolutionary. This is not revolution. This is a toddler putting a sticker on a spacecraft and claiming she built NASA. The tragedy deepens when you realize she is not stupid. She is something worse than stupid. She is solipsistic. Solipsism is the philosophical position that only one's own mind is certain to exist. Most philosophers reject it as unworkable. Dr. Winona has adopted it as a business model. Her heart rate monitor is not a diagnostic tool, it is a theological instrument.
It is
tells her whether the universe is properly aligned with her emotional state. When her BPM drops during what she calls Xinye rituals, and I will note that her use of a Chinese term for new moon in an English language essay about Western patriarchy is itself a magnificent act of cultural appropriation. From a civilization that practiced foot binding for 1,000 years, she interprets this physiological data as proof that she has contacted something transcendent. The possibility that she has simply relaxed in a quiet room with people who agree with her never occurs to her. The possibility that her parasympathetic activation is identical to what a man feels sitting in his garage with a beer after a 12-hour shift, building the infrastructure she depends upon for survival, that possibility is cosmically invisible to her. She has made her nervous system into an oracle, and like all oracles, it tells her exactly what she wants to hear. Watch how she speaks about the tradwife, that specter that haunts her waking hours and spikes her heart rate to 103 BPM. The tradwife wakes early, she makes coffee for her husband, she tends her children. She creates order in her household, she finds meaning in service, and Dr. Winona responds to this with the exact language one uses to describe a demonic possession. The tradwife is a foot soldier of the patriarchy. She creates order in her household, she finds meaning in service, and Dr. Winona responds to this with the exact language one uses to describe a demonic possession. The tradwife is a foot soldier of the patriarchy. Her satisfaction is internalized misogyny. Her peace is a trap. Why does this woman, who claims to want freedom for all women, react with such visceral hatred toward a woman who has chosen a different path? The answer should disturb you. She hates the tradwife because the tradwife functions. The tradwife builds. The tradwife creates life and nurtures it and transmits civilization to the next generation. Dr. Winona, by her own account, hosts new moon rituals and argues with her steering wheel cover. The tradwife has a husband who depends on her and children who need her. Dr. Winona has an Instagram account and a cat named after a feminist theorist. Winona has an Instagram account and a cat named after a feminist theorist. The rage she directs at the functional woman is the rage of the barren toward the fruitful, the rootless toward the rooted, the consumer toward the creator. It is the rage of someone who has made her own sterility into a political philosophy and cannot forgive those who expose it through their simple, functional existence. Here is the syllogism that Dr. Winona's entire worldview cannot survive. Premise 1, she claims her feelings constitute objective evidence of systemic injustice. Here is the syllogism that Dr. Winona's entire worldview cannot survive. Premise 1, she claims her feelings constitute objective evidence of systemic injustice. Premise 2, her feelings are triggered by women choosing traditional lifestyles, by men explaining things, by the existence of objective metrics, and by the absence of pink vegan leather. Conclusion, her philosophy is not a description of reality, but a symptom of her own psychological disorder. She has medicalized her inability to cope with a world that does not worship her. She has weaponized her fragility into a political program. She has turned her emotional incontinence into an academic credential. And the entire apparatus of modern institutions, universities that grant her degrees, publishers that print her words, social media platforms that amplify her grievances, governments that fund her programs with tax dollars extracted primarily from men, exist to validate this pathetic circular logic. I feel oppressed, therefore I am oppressed. Therefore my feelings prove my oppression. The men who built this civilization did not have heart rate monitors. They had calluses, they had hernias, they had silicosis and black lung and bodies broken by labor. They built the roads and bridges and power plants and sewer systems that make Dr. Winona's life of comfortable grievance possible. They died by the millions in wars fought to protect the societies she now condemns. And they did all of this without once demanding that the world be softened to accommodate their feelings. They did it because it needed doing. They did it because men build. That is what men do. We build, we protect, we provide, and then we die. And we ask only that our contribution be remembered honestly. Instead, we get Dr. Winona and her steering wheel cover, telling us that our civilization is a death cult while she drives on our roads, heated by our energy grids, protected by our police forces, fed by our agricultural systems, Winona and her steering wheel cover, telling us that our civilization is a death cult while she drives on our roads, heated by our energy grids, protected by our police forces, fed by our agricultural systems, typing her manifesto on devices manufactured by our engineering genius. The appropriate response to her essay is not anger. It is the quiet, immovable refusal to accept her frame. She has offered us a philosophy of the nursery, a worldview fit only for overgrown children who cannot bear the weight of existence without padding. We are the men who build the world she inhabits. We do not need her permission to continue. We do not need her approval. We need only to remember who we are and to stop apologizing for the civilization that our fathers built, and that she, from the comfort of her heated car with its pink steering wheel cover, presumes to judge. And I would not dwell on this particular transaction. Woman pays charlatan. Charlatan tells woman she is perfect. Repeat ad infinitum, except that it scales. Our priestess has not stopped at consuming this absolution. She has recognized that the same grift that captured her can be turned outward, aimed at other broken women, and monetized at the exact same rate. The architecture is already built. The theology is already established. She need only open her doors, light some sage, and charge $340 an hour for the privilege of hearing that nothing is ever your fault. The witch's wheel, occultism, parasitism, and the mechanics of decline. Our PhD-wielding priestess pays $340 an hour to a creature named River, named, one assumes, after the body of water, though erosion would be more honest, to have her sins washed not in blood, but in validation. The old confession required the penitent to name his fault, to kneel, to accept that he had failed the moral law written into the fabric of the cosmos. It demanded humility. It produced saints. River's somatic healing clinic produces neither saints nor sinners, only eternal patients. The replacement is exact and inverted. Where the confessional demanded that you name your vice, the therapy session demands that you name your wound. Where the priest said, "Go and sin no more," River says you have never sinned, you have been sinned against. Where the old rite required amendment of life, the new rite requires only that you keep paying. The transaction is beautifully circular. She carries generational patriarchal wound storage in her jaw, not a habit of clenching against reality, not the physiological tax of maintaining a worldview that collapses under the mildest cross-examination, but an ancestral haunting, a ghost that cannot be exorcised because it was never there. The therapist validates the diagnosis. The patient returns. The card is charged. The wound is confirmed but never healed, because healing would end the transaction. This is not medicine. It is simony, the sale of spiritual grace for cash, stripped of even the honesty of medieval indulgence sellers, who at least promised you'd get something in return. Consider the structure of the radical embodiment practice enterprise. Forgive the trademark symbol, but it tells you everything. A woman with a PhD in grievances has constructed a machine that converts female misery into her personal revenue stream while producing nothing of material value for anyone. She hires 2 assistants recovering from corporate patriarchal Stockholm syndrome, which is to say, 2 women who held jobs with expectations and found the experience disagreeable, and fires her accountant for asking whether the enterprise has a business plan. This is presented as courage rather than financial illiteracy. She replaces quarterly projections with feeling audits and KPIs with kosher point inquiries, which measures nothing that can be verified by anyone outside the cult. The ancient scholastics had a term for arguments that could neither be proven nor disproven because they referenced nothing in observable reality. They called them sophisms, and they threw them out. Her queered growth principles are sophistry with a monthly subscription fee. The pyramid scheme of misery operates on a simple syllogism. Your suffering is caused by an invisible patriarchal force. Only I can see this force. Therefore you must pay me to describe it to you in perpetuity. The pre-Christian priests of Carthage told parents that their children's deaths pleased Moloch. At least they had the decency to demand only the child, not an ongoing weekly invoice. The mycelial metaphor she deploys with such reverence, horizontal, rhizomatic through underground channels, is an admission she does not recognize. Mycelium does not build, mycelium decomposes. It feeds on dead matter. It is nature's recycler, necessary in its place, indispensable in the forest floor, but constitutionally incapable of constructing a bridge, a cathedral, or a legal code. When she says she rejects scaling like men in favor of growing like fungus, she is describing with perfect accuracy the metabolism of a parasite. The skyscraper rises because men coordinate in hierarchies of competence. The bridge spans the river because engineers submit to the unforgiving discipline of mathematics and physics. The corporation delivers goods to millions because someone imposed standards, measured outcomes, and fired incompetence. She calls this the patriarchal death drive while typing on a device containing 27 different metals mined by men who will die 20 years before she will, assembled in factories, where the word feeling audit has never once been spoken. The scavenger does not build the carcass she feeds upon. She merely arrives after the lion has made the kill and claims the leftovers as her sacred harvest. The supreme irony of the machine goes entirely unremarked in her testimony, which is itself a confirmation of the void she cannot observe. She drives a car, internal combustion or electric, either way a miracle of masculine engineering, on roads graded and paved by men, wearing vegan leather synthesized in chemical plants designed by men, monitoring her pulse on a device whose microchip represents 6 decades of concentrated masculine genius in solid-state physics. She posts her revelations on infrastructure built by men, maintained by men, secured by men patrolling streets. She will never walk at 3 in the morning. Every single artifact of her revolution is a product of the civilization she declares a death cult. She is a woman standing in a cathedral, screaming that stonemasons are murderers while the roof protects her from rain. The parasite bites the host and calls the blood a sacrament. When the host dies, and it is dying, as birth rates across the developed world fall below replacement, as marriage rates collapse, as the men who built and maintained everything check out of the enterprise one by one, there will be no more blood. The steering wheel cover will not comfort her then. The pivot to the coven deserves scrutiny precisely because she presents it without embarrassment. She performs rituals under the new moon. She calls her pleasure a sacrament. She describes Western civilization as a patriarchal death cult, while constructing a literal cult of her own, complete with ceremonies, sacred objects, and a priesthood of the feelings. This is not metaphor. This is not ironic performance art. She means every word. The structure is classically Luciferian in the theological sense. The elevation of the self above the created order, the declaration that one's own will and pleasure constitute the highest law, the reframing of restraint as oppression and of appetite as virtue. The old serpent did not tell Eve that God did not exist. He told her that God's prohibition was a patriarchal restriction on her flourishing. You shall not surely die, you shall be as gods. The promise was autonomy. The delivery was the knowledge of nakedness, shame, and mortality. 5,000 years later, the same promise is made in the same terms. Your pleasure is your birthright. Your refusal to serve is sacred. The order that sustains you is your oppressor. The new moon rituals and the heart rate monitor are the same technology. A device that tells you what you want to hear and confirms that you are the center of the universe. My pleasure is not negotiable. Write that sentence on the wall of every civilization that has ever collapsed, and you will find it already there, carved in the stone by people who believed that the banquet would never end. The Roman patricians said something similar in the 4th century. The Carthaginian elites said it before them. The aristocrats of every dying order have declared their comfort to be sacred, while the barbarians gathered at the gates, and the men who might have defended those gates were told their strength was toxic and their sacrifice unnecessary. Civilization is not built on pleasure. It is built on the suppression of pleasure in service of duty. The father who works a job he hates to feed his children is not performing a patriarchal death drive. He is performing the fundamental act of civilization, the subordination of the present self to the future good. The mother who tends a sick child at 3 in the morning is doing the same. When a culture declares that self-subordination is oppression and self-gratification is holiness, it has written its own epitaph. The locust does not deliberate. It consumes, it feels nice. Then it starves. Let us return to the steering wheel cover, that blush pink manifesto of resistance, that yielding surface of revolution. She grips it with calm, her heart rate drops, she feels sovereign. And somewhere beneath her car, the lithium in her battery was extracted by a man in a cobalt mine in the Congo who will be dead of lung disease before her resting heart rate reaches what she calls a medical emergency. Somewhere behind her, a police officer, a man, overwhelmingly a man, as 87% of American police officers are men, patrols the street so she can drive home safely from her new moon ritual. Somewhere far away, a soldier, overwhelmingly a man, as 85% of the American military is male, and 98% of combat deaths are male, stands a post so the borders of her country remain lines on a map rather than suggestions. These men do not have steering wheel covers. They do not have feeling audits. They have obligations, and they fulfill them, and they die earlier for it. 5 to 7 years earlier on average in every country on earth, from every cause of death that matters, and their deaths are invisible to her precisely because they are so common as to be the background noise of civilization itself. She calls her comfort radical. It is not radical. It is the oldest luxury in the world, the luxury of the protected, complaining that the shield is too heavy for the man holding it. The shield does not exist for her feelings. It exists so she can have feelings at all. When she breaks the shield because it offends her aesthetic, she will discover what the shield was protecting her from. The barbarians do not care about her steering wheel cover. They do not care about her feelings. They are not coming to negotiate. They are not coming to negotiate. I want you to hold Thomas in your mind, because Thomas is the answer to every specious, solipsistic, self-worshipping syllable that dripped from Dr. Winona's keyboard. She writes of pleasure as sacrament, while the real sacrament, the literal body given, the blood shed, the daily crucifixion of male labor that makes her entire cosseted existence possible goes unremarked. She calls Western civilization a death cult from inside a climate-controlled apartment built by men, powered by men, protected by men, serviced by men, and paid for by the tax surplus of men who die on average 6 years sooner than she ever will. She has the gall to medicalize her own narcissistic rage as parasympathetic activation, while 3.9 male suicides for every female suicide go unremarked by every institution she reveres. She worships at the altar of the sinuette, while the real altar, the one where fathers are sacrificed daily in close family courts, where due process is a memory, where accusation is conviction and the best interests of the child serves as the Arbeitmacht frei over the gate of the most elaborate system of involuntary servitude the modern West has ever constructed, goes unmentioned, unexamined, and unforgiven. But here is the good news, and I use that phrase with full theological weight. You have read this far, which means the spell is already breaking. You have seen the machinery behind the curtain. You understand that her revolution is not a revolution at all, but a revelation of what happens when a civilization permits its epistemology to be captured by a worldview indistinguishable from the neurotics. Freya, I feel, therefore I am right. You now possess what she cannot tolerate, the knowledge that her entire ideology is a confession, a projection, a single sustained cry of "Don't look at me, look at him." She needs you ignorant, she needs you guilty. She needs you apologizing for the bridge while she drives across it, condemning the engine while she rides in it, and calling the man who built both a toxic oppressor while she cashes the check his taxes wrote. The moment you stop apologizing, the entire architecture of her grievance collapses, because her power was never in her argument, it was in your compliance. The moment you stop apologizing, the entire architecture of her grievance collapses, because her power was never in her argument, it was in your compliance. You are free. You have seen the data, the logic, the unbroken chain of evidence that proves what every sane civilization knew until about 60 years ago, that men and women are equal in dignity and irreducibly different in design, and that any political system which conceals this truth, whether through gamma-biased institutional cowardice, feminist jurisprudential witch doctoring, or the woke mind virus that pathologizes masculinity as original sin, while enshrining female solipsism as human rights, will produce exactly what it has produced: broken homes, broken men, broken children, and a broken civilization ripe for conquest by anyone still willing to believe that reality exists and strength matters. Carry this knowledge forward. Speak it without apology. The truth does not require your rage, only your voice. And if your heart rate spikes while you're saying it, good. That's not oppression. That's called being alive. And now the sponsored book introduction, Fatherless Wound: How the Death of the Patriarch Breeds the Modern Pathology. I remember standing in a courtroom that smelled of old wood and moral decay, watching a man I knew to be a good father, a provider, a protector. A man who had built something real with his hands and his will get systematically dismantled by a system engineered to do precisely that. His crime was believing that his labor, his sacrifice, and his presence in his children's lives constituted a right that could not be legislated away by strangers. I watched the gavel fall. I watched another piece of civilization turn to dust. That was the moment I understood that what we face is not a crisis of policy, but a crisis of ontology, a war against the nature of being itself, against the grammar of reality that has ordered human flourishing since our ancestors first stood upright and faced the horizon. This book is not for everyone. Let me state that with absolute clarity right now. If you believe masculinity is inherently toxic, that the traditional family is an oppressive institution requiring demolition, this book is not for everyone. Let me state that with absolute clarity right now. If you believe masculinity is inherently toxic, that the traditional family is an oppressive institution requiring demolition, that gender is a fluid social construct rather than a biological and spiritual reality inscribed into creation itself, close these pages and walk away. There are thousands of publications that will flatter your assumptions and validate your ideology. Go read them. Find comfort in them. I have no quarrel with you, but you will find nothing here but provocation and fury. This work was not written for you, and you will serve neither yourself nor this text by continuing. Not. I write for the man who has felt the cold steel of betrayal, the man who has been stripped of his assets by a gynocentric legal apparatus that treats fatherhood as a financial extraction point rather than a sacred office. The man who has watched his children weaponized against him, alienated from him, turned into instruments of his punishment by a system that profits from family destruction. The man who opens his eyes in the morning and recognizes with terrible clarity that the culture surrounding him regards his very existence as a problem to be solved. I write for you. And what follows may preserve your sanity and possibly your life. I do not offer that as hyperbole. I have watched men destroy themselves under the weight of what has been done to them. I have also watched men transform that same devastation into the foundation of genuine, incorruptible masculine power. The difference between those outcomes is not luck or temperament. It is knowledge. That knowledge sits in your hands. For years I observed the wreckage accumulate. I watched competent, intelligent men reduced to visitors in their own homes, their wealth confiscated, their authority nullified. Their children taught to fear and resent them by an ideological machine that has spent generations perfecting its techniques. I watched boys grow up without fathers and develop precisely the pathologies that developmental psychology predicts. Borderline traits, narcissistic defenses, chronic attachment dysfunction, a reflexive suspicion of authority that manifests as either mindless rebellion or mindless submission. Then I watch the architects of this devastation survey their handiwork and pronounce it liberation. The word pathology descends to us from the Greek pathos, suffering, and logos, reason or account. A pathology is an account of suffering, and the suffering engulfing the modern world is not accidental. It is manufactured. It is the predictable, mathematically certain consequence of a civilization that has systematically excised the father from the family and then professed astonishment at the psychological carnage left in his absence. Fatherless children suffer dramatically elevated rates of poverty, substance abuse, mental illness, criminality, academic failure, and suicidal ideation. These are not interpretations. They are empirical facts as solid as any the social sciences have produced. Yet the cultural narrative endures. The patriarchal family was a prison, its dissolution represents freedom, and masculinity must be reconstructed or dissolved before genuine human flourishing becomes possible. I intend to demonstrate, with the kind of precision that admits no honest refutation, that this narrative is not merely incorrect, but precisely inverted. The absence of the patriarch generates the pathology. His presence prevents it. The removal of masculine authority from the household, never its exercise, produces the chaos, anxiety, sexual confusion, purposeless violence, and spiritual starvation that define our age. What you hold is a comprehensive analysis of how we arrived at this catastrophe, and a concrete plan for surviving, transcending, and rebuilding what has been destroyed. I will walk you through the ontology of patriarchal order, not merely what it does, but what it is, and demonstrate why this order reflects natural law and the fundamental structure of reality. I will deconstruct the grammatical trickery that allows phrases like toxic masculinity to function as intellectual currency, exposing how language manipulation has served as the advance guard of ideological conquest. I will trace the exact mechanisms through which chaotic, fatherless environments permanently wire personality disorders into developing minds, drawing on evolutionary psychology, developmental neuroscience, and the accumulated wisdom of the Western philosophical tradition. You will discover how family courts operate as mechanisms of wealth transfer and father removal. You will understand how welfare systems have positioned the state as a surrogate husband and why the collapse of the pair bond follows with mathematical inevitability. You will learn the historical trajectory of the long march through the institutions, the deliberate targeting of the family as the primary obstacle to total ideological control, and the replacement of the logos with the lukewarm void of postmodern meaninglessness. You will see, with clarity that may disturb you, why boys are failing by every measurable metric, and why the culture that produces this failure calls it progress. But diagnosis without prescription is mere complaint. This book provides the remedy. I will guide you through the crucible of betrayal, because if you are reading this, you have likely passed through it or stand at its threshold, and demonstrate how to navigate the liminal descent that follows when every institution you trusted reveals itself as hostile. I will teach you how to integrate the masculine shadow, how to master the logical and rhetorical tools required to dismantle the ideological illusions surrounding you, and how to reclaim the 4 pillars of mature masculinity that have anchored genuine male authority for millennia. I will show you how to construct what I call a gynocentric proof household, a fortress of psychological and spiritual sanity in a society engineered for collapse. I have spent years immersed in the Western canon, the Greeks who first codified the relationship between reason and reality, the Romans who built legal systems on natural law, the Christian theologians who understood the family as an icon of cosmic order, the philosophers who recognized truth, goodness, and beauty as objective realities woven into existence itself. I have also watched these traditions be systematically disassembled by an ideology that denies biological fact, rejects transcendence, and seeks to replace the accumulated wisdom of millennia with the fleeting passions of the moment. This book emerged from that collision. It is written for men who carry the tension in their bones, men who have been crushed by systems that despise them but who refuse to surrender. This book emerged from that collision. It is written for men who carry the tension in their bones, men who have been crushed by systems that despise them but who refuse to surrender. Men who sense at a level they may not yet articulate, that they bear within them something sacred, something targeted for destruction precisely because of its power. If that describes you, what follows will equip you with the intellectual armament, the psychological architecture, and the spiritual foundation necessary to stand upright in a world that demands your knees. You will learn to name the demons afflicting you, not metaphorically, but with the precision that comes from understanding their historical origins, their philosophical premises, and their operational tactics. You will learn to defend your lineage, shield your children from the psychological mutilation, passing for education, and forge a mind capable of enduring the full assault of a civilization in terminal decline. The knowledge contained here is not academic abstraction. It is forged in real experience, my own, and that of hundreds of men I have known across decades. It has been tested in family courts, ideological battlegrounds, and the private desolation of men who lost everything and had to choose between capitulation and resurrection. The men who rose did not do so through positive thinking or emotional ventilation. They rose through the recovery of a tradition that predates all our current pathologies, a tradition that understands masculinity not as a social construct to be manipulated, but as a biological and spiritual reality demanding cultivation and transmission. A tradition that understands masculinity not as a social construct to be manipulated, but as a biological and spiritual reality demanding cultivation and transmission. I ask you to think, to follow arguments where they lead, to examine evidence with the clear rationality that is your inheritance as a man and your responsibility as a conscious being. I ask you to think, to follow arguments where they lead, to examine evidence with the clear rationality that is your inheritance as a man and your responsibility as a conscious being. If the arguments collapse under scrutiny, abandon them. If the evidence fails to support the conclusions, reject them. But if they hold, and they do, you will face a decision: continue participating in your own annihilation, or take up the mantle that has waited for you since before your birth. The patriarch is dead, they announce. The patriarch is obsolete. The patriarch is the source of all suffering. I tell you, the patriarch is not dead.
The patriarch is the source of all.
He has been drugged, bound, and locked in the basement of a civilization, terrified of what he represents. He is stirring. This book is the sound of that awakening. Fatherless Wound: How the Death of the Patriarch Breeds the Modern Pathology, written by Conrad Reicher. Buy now, links in description.